Welcome back to Hardball. Is it possible that the recession and the election of Barack Obama can be used as a tool to recruit members to right-wing extremist groups? Well, according to a new report by the Department of Homeland Security, the answer is yes. It reads in part, quote, "Many right-wing extremists are antagonistic toward the new presidential administration and its perceived stance on a range of issues, including immigration and citizenship, the expansion of social programs to minorities, and restrictions on firearm ownership and use," unquote. Are right-wing groups simply upset that they are losing control of the country, and are they an imminent threat? Let's ask Air America's Mark Green, who's also editor of Change for America, and radio talk show host Heidi Harris, who's joining us from Las Vegas. I'd like you to listen to a cut from Rush Limbaugh, Heidi and Mark. Listen to this. We'll get your reaction.
This is the Democrat Party, Department of Homeland Security. Janet Napolitano put this together. There is not one instance they can cite as evidence where any of these right-wing groups have done anything. Because this Department of Homeland Services report is nothing more than a partisan hit job filled with lies and innuendo that portrays any conservatism as right-wing extremism.
Heidi, do you buy that?
Yeah, I talked about it on my show this morning, and a lot of the things that Rush had said I have to agree with. I mean, what are they basing these allegations on? And I got to tell you, the right wing, we're not upset about it because we didn't expect Barack Obama to do anything other than what he's done for the economy. And when they talk about how bloggers are worrying everybody about the economy and jobs and everything else, wait a minute, that's what Barack Obama focused on throughout his campaign, how bad the economy is, how bad the jobs are. That's what he's focused on. The right wing is no different than the left wing from this perspective. So I'm not even sure where they're getting a lot of this information. It doesn't even make sense to me.
Well, Heidi, the report, if you look at it, it refers to right-wing extremists. I mean, do you refer to yourself as a right-winger or a conservative?
No, I'm a conservative, but they refer to anybody who's concerned about the economy as a right-wing extremist. And I had to laugh, once again, when they mentioned people blogging about the economy and jobs and that kind of thing. Yeah, well, that's what the Obama campaign did, tried to panic everybody about jobs and the economy. So I don't understand where they're making that a right-wing issue as opposed to a left-wing issue.
Mark Green, you're smiling. What are you smiling at?
Well, I'm smiling because Rush Limbaugh is skilled at filling time. They are exaggerating molehills into mountains. Now, they didn't make allegations against individuals. They didn't infiltrate groups. They didn't silence protesters. They're not sicking the FBI on people, as J. Edgar Hoover did with COINTELPRO in the 1970s against anti-war protesters. That was wrong. And if the Obama administration had done anything remotely like that, that would be wrong, because in this country we allow antagonistic speech, ideological speech, hate speech, not hate crimes. So apparently what Homeland Security did was a think piece. I read a summary of it, and they said, without naming names, which would be improper for a law enforcement agency to do publicly, they said, look, there are conditions that happened before in the 90s, and if they keep going, you know, we had a Timothy McVeigh who was incited by hate speech into an enormous crime. We had someone who killed Dr. Schleppian in Buffalo. Let's watch out for it. One last point, Mike. It's not ideological because the report itself says that left-wing groups, their phrase, might use cyberspace to commit crimes in the next decade. Yeah. So they split it.
Hey, Heidi, I've listened to your program. I know you can be thoughtful. I've heard you be thoughtful. So let me ask you this. I'm going to read you two sentences from the summary of the Homeland Security report. Okay, here are the two sentences. Despite similarities to the climate of the 1990s, the threat posed by lone wolves in small terrorist cells is more pronounced than in past years. In addition, the historical election of an African-American president and the prospect of policy changes are proving to be a driving force for right-wing extremist recruitment and radicalization. Do you buy that?
Well, no. I mean, when they're talking about terrorist groups, are they talking about Islamic terrorist groups?
You don't buy that? You don't buy what I just read to you?
No, I don't. I'll tell you why. I read the report, of course, and as you mentioned, I talked about it on my show. I know what the report says. As you mentioned in your previous segment, they're doing tea parties all over America today, protesting how upset they are with the government and some of the things that have been done. Nobody's bringing out guns. Nobody's shooting anybody. They're just protesting.
Heidi, lone wolves in small terrorist cells. Unfortunately, 2 weeks ago, you had an absolute nutcase in Pittsburgh, a lone wolf, a classic lone wolf, shoot and kill 3 Pittsburgh police officers because he was upset at the direction of the country.
You can find a lone wolf anywhere with any kind of ideology. That's not a right-wing thing versus a left-wing thing. You want to go through all the people who've shot up colleges and talk about their ideology? This isn't a lone wolf right-wing thing. I don't know where you glean that. Just because it says that in the report, it doesn't make sense to me. Conservatives don't expect anything better from government, and conservatives don't expect government to take care of them. I think the government's at less risk from conservatives than liberals who think Obama's going to pay their mortgage, fill up their gas tank, and basically take care of them cradle to grave. They'll be more disappointed.
So, in other words, this whole thing revolves around an obsession with Barack Obama. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Well, no, I'm not obsessed with Barack Obama. My point is that the people on the right aren't expecting anything else from Barack Obama. The people on the left who voted him in, who have talked about the fact that they literally think he's going to pay their mortgage, he's going to do everything for them, they're going to be more disappointed by his administration than I am. I don't expect Barack Obama to do anything for me. I don't expect government to take care of me and put a Band-Aid on my rear end if I lose my house or anything else. The left wing is more upset, or going to be, than the right wing, frankly.
Mike?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Heidi and I have appeared before, and we have healthy debates, and of course she didn't vote for it as opposed to Obama. That's fine. When she says the left wing who elected Obama, it's called a majority of Americans. 3 times the number of Americans gave Obama the majority that Bush won in '04. Elections have consequences, and you don't agree with his economic policies, and by and large I do. When that's not the basis of the Homeland Security report. You can have all the tea days you want, the wars on Christmas. What I regard all these as kind of contrived faux populism. What the report said, though, is there's kindling. There are hate groups. There are neo-Nazi groups. That's true. We have returning veterans who have access to guns and like them and may be frustrated. We have laws locally, ordinances that have more firearm controls, which can set off some people who are anxious. This is a very contingent if. So long as the government doesn't violate privacy, as it did 30 years ago, when I didn't hear any conservative complaints, when they infiltrated and disrupted liberal groups against the war, so long as they avoid that, it's prudent for law enforcement officials to say, to what extent did all this add to, I don't know the answer, the person that Mike cites in Pittsburgh who set a trap for and killed 3 cops. That's not common.
Well, Mark,
it's something to watch out for.
Let me ask you this, though, Mark. I mean, the specter of the double standard here. If the Bush administration, if under their Homeland Security Department, if they had issued a similar report talking about the G20 protesters in Seattle and left-wing extremists, I mean, do you think it would? What do you think would have happened in this country in terms of its coverage?
Not much, because
really?
Well, let me point out, left-wing so-called or progressives believe in the right to protest without violence, and if the government says we have to watch out for something, so long as they don't inhibit the battle, people who are protesting the G20, for example, I think most people would shrug. However, as I pointed out, if Bush tried to do what happened under Hoover and use the FBI to disrupt nonviolent protests, that's crossing the line, and Heidi and Limbaugh have to agree. We're not even, and won't, and shouldn't be, and won't be under Obama, remotely close to that. We have a constitutional law professor as president. He's the last of 44 presidents who would do that.
Heidi, last word.
I was just going to say that, ultimately they're worried about even things like people stocking up guns and ammunition and food. What are they, against all the Mormons who stock up food? And who cares how many guns I have or how much ammo I have in my house? Why is that a threat to the government? That's the stuff that's very scary in this report to those of us who are conservative. We're very concerned about it.
Someone's going to break into your house, Heidi, steal your guns, so they're going to end up in Mexico. That's where the guns are going.
No,
Heidi Harris.
Someone breaks in. No,
Yeah, what?
Somebody breaks into my house, they're going out on a gurney, I'm telling you that.
Yeah, no, if they break into your house, that's what they do for a living. You don't shoot people for a living. That's the big fallacy of people with a lot of guns in their house. But thanks, Heidi. Heidi Harris, Mark Green, thanks for being here tonight. Up next.